Hey everyone, my name is Ben Chaish. I'm a wedding and elopement photographer based in the Pacific Northwest, and this is going to be my review of the amazing TTArtisan's 50mm f1.4 spherical. Now, I've used a few different 50mm lenses over the years, from the original 50 1.8 on the Canon, the Nifty 50. I have plenty of other 50s. I've used the Canon L series, a few Zeiss, and now I've landed on the amazing 50mm Summilux spherical. I did a whole video on that. It's my favorite lens that I own. It's amazing. But the thing that is kind of, I don't know, hard about it is that it's like a $4,700 lens or something like that. And when you're already spending anywhere from like $4,500 to like $6,000 on the bodies, then you're gonna add a lens that costs, you know, you're putting together a package that's over $11,000. And there are a ton of Leica purists that will never put anything except for Leica lenses on their cameras, and cool, good for you. But like, I'm not a dentist or a doctor, so I don't have that kind of money. And so as I did with the TTArtisan's 35 1.4, I'm doing the same thing with the TTArtisan's 50 1.4 and trying to find the best budget options for people to get into this Leica system. Now, right off the bat, this lens was provided to me by TTArtisan's for review. But they're not paying me and they're not sponsoring this in any way. So while they did send this over, they don't get to preview this or anything like that, but they did send it over for this kind of series that I'm doing on lower cost options for the M-mount system. And while this video isn't sponsored by TTArtisans, this video is sponsored by Cascade Presets, which are the presets that I have made and use solely for all of my work. They're great for weddings, outdoors, portraits, and they have a lot of usability in them. As a wedding photographer, I'm using them in all sorts of lighting conditions, all sorts of different scenarios. So they have multiple different looks to help you through all of those editing processes. Now I'll cut to the chase right off the bat, and I will say that this lens is amazing, and it's honestly probably the best bang for the buck in any Leica M-mount lens that I have seen so far. The lens comes in at $369, while, you know, this Summilux, which is definitely superior, comes in at like $4,700. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking through all this kind of stuff. The lens is $369, which is just absolutely absurd for how good it is. Now, one of the things you'll see right off the bat is that I've added this lens hood. I picked this up for, you know, like $8 or something stupid cheap on Amazon. It just screws into the filter thread mount right there. It does say 49mm on the front of it. And so if you can see it, I just took some black Sharpie and just Sharpied over it. So, you know, we're not going for like heavy, extra amazing looks here. But I will say that having a lens hood on a 50mm lens is definitely helpful, especially I shoot a lot of backlit stuff, so having something to kind of filter that out is really, really helpful. And while we're on that subject, one of the weird kind of negative cons about this lens is that I didn't get it a lot of times. I only got it once, but it has a really, really weird flare in heavy backlight. Once the flare kind of comes in, it separates. Still don't really know what that is and why that was, but it happened, so be aware. Now, build quality wise, it's amazing. It is, you know, made out of metal. It doesn't feel like the silver Summilux. You know, nothing really feels like this. It's small, compact, and beautiful in its, you know, brass or whatever the heck this thing's made out of. But I would not say this feels cheap at all. It actually has a more dampened focus throw than the Summilux. Mine has just been used so much that it's actually pretty loose now. I'm actually considering getting it serviced at some point. But everything else is amazing. The apertures click really great. And one of the other things that's really nice is I'm not sure how many aperture blades it's in here, But I believe it's actually more than the Summilux, because as I stopped down, I was actually getting better bokeh quality out of it than I was out of the Summilux, because I'm assuming there's more aperture blades in here. All that being said, again, I always test my lenses at kind of their peak. I'm assuming for the most part, most decent lenses that I'm gonna have are gonna shoot fine at f5.6. So I'm usually most interested in how lenses perform wide open, and this thing is sharp. I've taken this thing out a few times with my son. We've just done like photo walks and random stuff, and it's really sharp. Like, I was not anticipating it being very good, but it is definitely sharp. Now, one of the things I don't like about it in terms of just overall styling, it is a little bit larger. It kind of reminds me of the design of like the 50 Oppo. It's not that much longer. It's pretty much the same size if you kind of look at it on here. It's definitely front heavy. Not that the Summilux isn't, but it also is one of those things where, like, you know, the 50 Summilux, like when it sits right here, it just kind of sits on it. The lens tab on this is a little bit bigger because this barrel is a little bit bigger, you know, so this one pops up while this one falls down a little bit. Not that big a deal, but some of the comments that I was getting on it, and I will acknowledge that especially when adding this lens hood, it just looks really, really big. But for it being a 51.4, especially for like the price, I did not mind carrying it around. So with any of the 7Artisans or TTArtisans lenses, one of the things you're gonna have to know is that they don't come calibrated. It's one of the things that is, I'm assuming, just like a cost-saving measure for them. So they come with this little focus chart, and it gives you kind of directions and stuff like that on how to do it. And it is nice too, because it tells you, you know, if it's front focusing or back focusing, which direction to turn it. But be aware that you do have to, you know, get it and do a little bit of work on the back end yourself. So when you do, it comes with a little screwdriver. And then on the back of the lens here, you see these three little, you know, dots where a little screw is. So you do have to bring that in, rotate this thing around. If you have access or, you know somebody with a digital body, this takes like 3 or 4 minutes. But if you don't, I've seen people do things with Scotch tape and different kind of things to make it work. So just a heads up. And if you're using it on mirrorless camera or something that's not a, you know, actual analog rangefinder in that way, you're not gonna have an issue. But if you are using it on a Leica film body, just a heads up, it's going to be an issue and you are gonna have to calibrate it. I will say that I took these out, tested them side by side, and the color isn't exactly consistent. The color out of this seems to be slightly warmer and slightly more magenta than the Summilux. That being said, the Summilux and my Zeiss 35 Distagon are a little bit different in color temperature, as are a lot of different things. I think that a lot of people don't really think about the fact that lenses actually do have a lot to do with color. Most people think they have a lot to do with sharpness and contrast and stuff like that, but the lens does color shift a little bit from what I'm feeling like is a pretty neutral sense from the Summilux. But just a heads up, it's not a big deal. It's, you know, a little bit of a white balance shift, but it's not anything too crazy. So that being said, when I did take these guys and stick them next to each other back to back, I was actually pretty shocked at the results. Again, the Summilux is a $4,700 lens, and this is a $369 lens. And I mean, I'm kind of speechless. I just did the test and just went and looked at the files. The Summilux wins, but not by that much. It's definitely not a perfect lens. It has chromatic aberration. There is noticeable vignetting. But one of the things that's amazing about the 50 Summilux is the lack of chromatic aberration in a lot of things. But in the test side by side, they're actually much more comparable than I thought they would be. And also in my just use of the lens for the times I took it out, it wasn't something that I noticed like really obviously and had to immediately correct for. Again, sharpness, especially at the center on this thing, is ridiculous. Again, for the money, like this is more than plenty sharp, and the build is amazing. Honestly, even if they price this at double what they're charging for it, I think it would be worth it for a 50mm f1.4, such a standard, solid focal length that pretty much everyone is going to have. Again, especially if 50mm isn't necessarily your primary focal length and you need a 50mm lens, this is like the nifty 50 on steroids. So thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I want to be a good resource on this kind of stuff because especially lenses like this that are new, there's not a lot of information out about them. So if you have any questions, please drop them below. I will try to get to all of them. I will leave links to these straps, the lenses, all this kind of stuff, as well as this lens hood in the description. So thanks so much again, and I will see you on the next one.